All set? All right. I think we are all set and ready to get started. Thank you everyone so much for joining. My name is Debbie Franzel and I am your host and MC for this conversation today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this conversation. I am really pleased to be and honored to be hosting this conversation today. As I said, my name is Debbie Franzel. I'm a product marketing director here at ServiceNow, and I'm really just going to be your host and facilitator of the conversation. You joined us to hear a bit about Avery Dennison, and they are really a leader in transformation of global HR service delivery. A few housekeeping tips before we get into the bulk of the conversation. We will be recording this conversation, so you don't need to be worried about, are you going to be capturing this? You will be sent a recording of the conversation as well as the slides. So no need to be screen capturing, etc. We are pleased to be able to share the recording and the slides from the conversation today. One of the things that I just wanted to share before we dive into the conversation is just a little bit about my background. I've been in this industry for about 28 years and have seen a whole lot of organizations dive into HR transformations around HR service delivery. And one of the things that I've learned over these years is that deployment of technology sounds like, great, I'm going to go out and deploy technology. I'll buy it and I'll just deploy it. But the most important thing about deployment of HR technology isn't really just buying it and thinking, oh, great, I'll just implement it. It's really critical to ensure that you think about the vision and the outcomes that you seek to achieve, and ensure that internally you have alignment and a vision and support from the top down. Avery Dennison is a great example of an organization that really sought that alignment internally, and importantly, invested in a great partner in Leapgen and in a deployment partner in the Anti. And today we have a great conversation teed up for you with panelists from Leapgen and from the Anti, and very importantly, with Chassidy Rellinger, who led this transformation with Avery Dennison. So with that, no more from me. I'm really pleased to turn the conversation first over to Greg Smith from the Anti, who is a great partner to Chassidy, and Alex from Leapgen. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg to introduce himself, and then we'll turn it over to the other panelists to introduce themselves. With that, Greg Smith.
Hey, thanks, Debbie. I appreciate it. Like Debbie said, we're super excited to have this conversation today to help tell a little bit about the story of the implementation HR transformation strategy that Avery Dennison has been undergoing for about the last 2 years. Like Debbie said, my name is Greg Smith. I'm a Chief Operating Officer here at the Anti. I'm also a managing partner. So in the seat that I sit in, I get to witness firsthand a lot of these deployments and HR transformations like we're talking about today. And we're super excited about this. And in the past, like I've worked at other HR technology companies deploying HR solutions like Kronos Time and Attendance, Ultimate Software, Workday services, and have been in the ServiceNow ecosystem now for about 4 years. So just a really broad exposure to a lot of different HR technologies. So it's been super exciting being in the ServiceNow space for the last 4 years to stitch together better employee experience, which have historically been pretty point solutions across the HR community. So again, super excited. Alex, I think you're going to introduce yourself, and then Chassidy, and we'll get this thing going.
Yeah, Greg, thank you. I'm Alex Zaia. I am a client partner at Leapgen. What we do at Leapgen is work with great folks like Greg and Chassidy and really help think about how we deliver services at scale to workforces in a way that creates a great seamless employee experience. So we help partner from that digital strategy side all the way through deployment and thinking about things like, how do we understand the voice of our employees? How do we design the right service delivery models? And then how do we make sure that we think about introducing those changes effectively in a way that drives adoption? I've been in this space for a little over a decade, and first spent a lot of time internally, got to work with some great folks on these teams from the client side, first at Time Inc. and then Morgan Stanley, and joined Leapgen about 5 years ago at this point, and have since gotten to work with some of our great partners like Chassidy Actually, speaking of Chassidy, I'm just so thrilled to be able to introduce her today. I've worked with Chassidy for the last 4 years or so. Greg mentioned that 2-year transformation, but we've been on this journey a lot longer, starting from when Chassidy actually stepped into this role for the first time as the HR technology leader. Chassidy will share her background, but I do just want to share a little bit of the story because I think, Chassidy, you are very humble, and I want to make sure we set this off in the right way. Chassidy was actually the head of talent acquisition prior to this transformation at Avery Dennison, but did such a great job leading an implementation of smart recruiters that she was offered that initial HR technology lead role. In stepping into that, everyone at Avery Dennison at the time assumed that they would tackle what seemed to be the biggest problem at hand, which was a very legacy, outdated core HCM on-prem platform. And before jumping right into the technology, Chassidy took a step back and actually reached out to Leapgen to say, hey, how do we really think about the company strategy, the HR strategy, and then what the digital HR strategy should be to support that? And together we built a plan that has led to this transformation. And in the last 4 years, Chassidy's built a global workforce operations team. We refer to that as GWO. She's going to share this story, but I just want to share the success of it to start. And Chassidy's built this team that's actually now over 1/3 of the HR team at Avery Dennison, and it includes HR service delivery, payroll, technology, and analytics support, all delivered through a seamless digital-first employee experience. And it's just phenomenal. Chassidy's made this dream that so many of us talk about around the employee experience and delivering that consumer-like experiences. She's made it a reality. So Chassidy, I just wanted to start there by saying great job. And I'm so excited that we get to share this story with this group today.
Thank you very much, Alex. Very humbled by and flattered by the introduction. And it was truly a team that did an amazing job over the last few years. And some of the team is on the call today, both in our partners and on the Avery Dennison side. So I'll speak to that a bit. But I think where I do want to start off, and Alex introduced me a little bit. I've been in HR for over 20 years. I've been in HR with Avery Dennison for 15 years, and my background is pretty diverse. So I've done field HR business partnership. As Alex mentioned, I've led talent acquisition, HR technology, HR shared services. For the last year, I've led total rewards as well. And I'm now actually in the midst of transitioning back to a country lead for business partnership. So I have a passion for the field, but most importantly, really have kind of, I think, found my niche around, in the digital space and around really focusing on how process connects to experience. And that's what I've really enjoyed for this journey. But if we can move to the next slide, just on Avery Dennison, because I want to set the context in a couple different ways. And to start off, I'll introduce you to Avery Dennison in case you're not familiar with us. We are a Fortune 500 global manufacturing company. We recently redesignated our headquarters from Glendale, California to Mentor, Ohio, which is where I'm based, just outside of Cleveland. We're pretty diverse in terms of capabilities and products. And on the next slide, you can see just kind of at a glance a little bit about what we do. Overall, we're providing branding and information labeling solutions, and these are primarily pressure sensitive materials, which means they stick on something when you apply pressure. But we're also growing into all sorts of markets in RFID, and then a variety of converted products in medical and automotive, et cetera. We serve pretty much every industry worldwide. So home and personal care, apparel, e-commerce, logistics, food, pharma, and automotive. You probably interact with an Avery Dennison product a couple dozen times a day. You just don't know it because it's a part of another product that you're touching. But we're truly everywhere you are and everywhere you look. From an HR perspective, we've been on quite a transformation journey over the last few years, as was alluded to in the kickoff. And if we go to the next slide, there's just a kind of a one-page high-level summary. We have been on the journey, as Alex said, for several years, and it's been an exciting time. It's something that we branded internally, called we named it E3, which stood for Evolving HR and the Employee Experience. And we really focused on improving and modernizing that employee experience, and then evolving our HR function as a whole. So it wasn't just about creating a workforce operations or shared services delivery model. It was about creating a new way of working across HR. And we worked closely with Alex and the Leapgen team since the beginning, as Alex mentioned, when we developed our HR strategy, our digital HR strategy. And then we've really partnered with Leapgen all the way through service delivery work, and even continuing on now as we're focusing on our talent management strategies as well. At the time that we started, I had just moved into this HR solutions leadership role, and I had the opportunity to then lead this transformation journey, which included our ServiceNow implementation. And then as an output of the project, I went on to lead the GWO, or Global Workforce Operations Organization, which is what we've branded our HR shared services team as. To set a little more context on our technology landscape in general, we do have PeopleSoft still for our core HCM. We use SuccessFactors for comp and learning. And we have homegrown Google-based tools for performance management and succession planning, Smart Recruiters for talent acquisition, and Tableau for analytics. And prior to this particular body of work and transformation, we didn't really have established, consistent HR shared services, nor did we have any type of service delivery technology, no portal, no knowledge base, nowhere employees could go to directly access information or services directly. So employees literally had to go find the person, whether it be an HR admin, an HR generalist, HR manager, to find information, to get their questions answered, or issues resolved. And what we heard pretty consistently was that often meant that, depending on the size of the country that they're in terms of employee base, they had to go to multiple HR people, multiple HR departments, which, is frustrating, especially for our shift workers. And it also meant that our HR staff, especially again in countries where we didn't have significant employee base, we're doing all of the roles. So it wasn't uncommon for us to have an HR manager who was helping to run payroll, who was entering data into PeopleSoft, who was recruiting, and who was also doing employee relations and talent development. And just the model itself, as we continue to grow and expand, just wasn't effective for us anymore. So at the same time, where we were embarking on our journey in HR, our IT organization was actually actively working to replace their service delivery platform. They were on BMC Remedy, and they were looking to sunset that and move to something a bit more modern and effective. And so we found that as an opportunity and worked with IT to select and implement ServiceNow together. And we decided as part of that to implement Employee Service Center, that one shared portal where our employees go for all of their HR and IT needs. So I think that was a significant component of what we did and is driving a lot of our success today. From an operating model standpoint, this was not the first time that Avery Dennison had embarked on a service delivery type project. There had been a few attempts that just didn't move forward. I think our key difference this time around was that we really prioritized employee experience and just the changing expectation of the workforce. And this was pre-pandemic, so that has obviously been accelerated even more. But it was a core principle for us of the why we were doing this work. And I think that approach really did lead to stronger engagement and adoption from HR themselves and from our broader organizational stakeholders and employees. Much different kind of feel to the project than looking at HR shared services viewed purely from an efficiency or cost out perspective. And I mentioned this very first, but cannot go without saying and can't say enough that one of the biggest keys to success from this work is the team that we built to do the work. We had a core team of about 35 individuals globally, not their full-time role, but a priority within their role for this period of time. And then we had an even larger cross-functional extended team. And we did a lot of pre-work before we ever gave Greg a call at the Anti. We spent a lot of time with Alex and the Leapgen team, a full year really, working on data collection, understanding our global and our regional and country level processes, where we had challenges there, getting HR and employee feedback and buy-in throughout, and then working through the org design, and probably a big chunk of what we did in pre-work and important was preparing our knowledge base. So again, I mentioned we didn't have real knowledge bases at all. We had Google Drives, we had some old stuff in Lotus Notes. There was nothing really there. We were almost starting from scratch. And we knew that was going to be key for what we wanted to deliver and meet our goals. So we spent a lot of time in prep for that work. We did that pre-work in parallel to building the business case and technology selection. And from an org design decision perspective, we built a kind of hub and spoke model for our GWO team. So it's a virtual team. It's not large centers. We have 2 hubs in the Americas, 2 in EMEA, and 3 in Asia. And those teams are all virtual for the most part. We do have more of a base of employees together in China, Vietnam, and in the US. We are completely insourced from a talent perspective. So we brought in individuals to GWO from our field HR organization. So whether it be people who were, dedicated to payroll or did payroll partially, but we're also really involved in general inquiry management. We brought those individuals in. And so we really staffed the entire team from within.
Chassidy, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I had just a quick question about something that you said just a minute ago that maybe I'll ask quickly and maybe pull Alex into the conversation in terms of how Leapgen was able to help you. One of the things that's actually at the top of your slide here in terms of business case that I think some of the folks on the call might have a question about. You mentioned that you had tried this before from a service delivery perspective.
Yeah.
I think that can be a sticking point for organizations, right? They get started and then they lose steam or they lose funding perhaps, or that support within an organization. Can you talk a little bit about how did you build the business case this time and where did you find the key to success in terms of finding support from stakeholders internally? And what do you think was really the turning point this time at Avery Dennison? And how did you actually find that you were going to find those measures of success? And how did Leapgen help you to build that business case to be able to move forward this time?
Yeah, great question. I do think really the way that we focused and positioned the business case was really focused on employee experience and the changing expectations from the workforce. What our model was holding us back from, meaning a model where everything was driven by, everything was manual and driven by the people in these roles. and where we needed to also be able to free up our HR business partners and our COEs to spend their time aligning to the overall business strategy and some of those goals as well. But we did not have a huge efficiency or cost out play. There were some opportunities that we identified, but that's not really where we focused. Another area that was important because it linked to our HR strategy and because it linked to the business strategy was around data and analytics. And one of the benefits of centralizing what we did inside of GWO was to have true kind of data management expertise sitting in the center, where we were completely limiting the amount of people who were touching our employee data. And so our data accuracy rates have gone up, and you had that potential, which is what we talked about in the business case, and have gone up a lot, which then is the foundation for us to be able to deliver meaningful, reliable talent analytics to the business. And so that was another big piece that we emphasized a lot. And then, of course, there was the kind of shared component of going with IT, and actually our procurement organization also is a ServiceNow user. So we really looked at it from an enterprise consistency of experience, consistency of process angle as well. And we talked about agility. We talked about being able to really service the business needs better. We're growing, we're hiring, we're acquiring, and the model that we had and the lack of kind of abilities for employees to do things on their own and the lack of technology really drove additional HR costs all the time. So we were kind of keeping pace with the business growth, needing to have just continue to build, manual and labor focused HR structure. And so as an example, we've had about a 15% increase in kind of data volume with the workforce, whether it be hiring, terminations, acquisitions. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to absorb that flat, relatively speaking, in GWO. So we didn't know that particular number was there, but we talked about this potential of what we knew was coming and how we could help meet the business goals more effectively.
That's great. Alex, anything that you wanted to add in terms of how you helped build the business case? And I know Chassidy mentioned, the year-long work that you did on this transformation program.
Yeah, I think that the thing I can share that's most helpful here was how we approached it and really how Chassidy approached it. So we built this roadmap together, and on the roadmap, we knew that we had to tackle a significant amount of design before we even went in to ask for the business case. We had to explain how would employees be able to be served? How would they still have, there are countries, Avery Dennison is in over 50 countries, and some of those countries only have 60 or 100 employees. So it's a very unique model, and we had to be able to answer those questions in advance of asking for any funding for the broader deployment of ServiceNow and other support that we knew we needed. And I would say that the key to that was, again, answering those questions in advance, but then the enrollment that Chassidy made sure happened with every single leader. By the time that business case actually went in front of Mitch, in front of the CEO, everyone who was then sitting next to him and around him was enrolled and felt like they had been heard and their needs had been surfaced and accounted for in terms of the broader HR strategy and how service delivery was going to enable that. And so that's a lesson that we try and bring into all of our clients, is to say, it's one thing to put together the business case, it's another to build the right relationships and then support that true enrollment and even awareness across the organization of how HR service delivery can support the company as a whole. And Chassidy, you did a great job of that.
Yeah, we did take a bit of a roadshow approach with the business case, and every leader we talked to, and we from a CLT perspective, we digested their feedback, incorporated everything we could, and then kept going. And I think Alex's point, by the time we got to the securing the funding, it was just that final conversation and being able to say, we've done these things and incorporated this feedback, and here's where we are, and we're confident. And we went forward from there.
And so Chassidy, once you had all that feedback and the funding, and you clearly had a great business case for moving forward, how did you determine what the right deployment roadmap would be for Avery Dennison? Because you clearly had a lot to do. How did you partner then with the anti to determine what would be the right jumping off point?
Yeah, so that work really started for us in 2019. We began working with Greg and the anti team. And Leapgen continued to be involved. So we actually brought in all of our goals and requirements. Leapgen helped us with that. And from a customer perspective, in terms of transitioning that to the anti for the build, was a really incredible and seamless process because we were greenfield. So we didn't know what we didn't know. And so working with partners who are, also have worked together and are connected was great. From a deployment standpoint, I remember feeling, and Alex will probably vouch for this, I was probably pinging her 30 times a day, really overwhelmed with then, going through all of this pre-work and feeling like we're good to go, or making all these decisions, but then making the actual decisions of how to deploy and how to actually bring it to life. And feeling confident that we were going the right path. So we worked to build out case and knowledge and employee service center and ServiceNow. We decided on an approach of a short, about a 30-day HR to HR soft launch. So we did that in 2 of our hubs, US and China. We gave HR 30 days to literally raise cases amongst themselves. They didn't have full access to portal, but we made it happen. And then our first go live was with those 2 hubs. So the US and China went live first on the same day that IT went live globally. And from there, we went hub by hub, mainly focusing on going live to our professional employees first. And the reason for that was that a big part of the work we did was to, for the first time, enable digital identity for our shop floor, for our manufacturing employees. And that was a big technical undertaking where we, again, partnered with our great IT partners to get that done. But that's why we chose to do shop floor in kind of the follow-up wave, because it gave us a little more time to prepare the change management components of that, and kind of get that ready to go. But yeah, we went hub by hub, always having that soft launch first, then the employee launch, and we did it all. We did global deployment in 6 months. So it took us 6 months to get through all those launches to all 36,000 employees, and we delivered in 28 languages.
It only took you 6 months to deliver in 28 languages and globally?
Yes. And again, comes down to the reach of the team. We had language represented on the team, countries represented on the team. A lot of translation still goes on every day, but in terms of the key services, key knowledge articles, we had those translated on an as needed basis so we could serve our employees in the language that they speak.
That's fantastic. 6 months, I think, and I said earlier, I've been doing this a long time, and 6 months is incredible to deliver that scope of service. There was a question.
Debbie, as a clarification, 6 months was deployment, right? So build took us quite a bit longer.
Absolutely.
We started in fall of 2019, went live first deployment June. So 7-8 months for the build, I guess, is probably where that was. Yep.
Absolutely. So maybe we can pull Greg into the conversation here just to talk about anything that he would like to comment on that was unique to the Avery Dennison deployment. He's been doing this for a while as well, as he commented on at the beginning. But what was unique, Greg, from your perspective about partnering with Chassidy and team?
There's the things that I found unique about Avery Dennison and the plan that they had in front of them was, one, this was a greenfield implementation. Obviously, ServiceNow ITSM is the leader in IT service management. So there's a lot of product penetration across the market. So many organizations of the size and scale that Avery Dennison operates are already IT service management customers and have at least ITSM, maybe other products, and they have some institutional knowledge of ServiceNow and know how to operate the platform as a whole. So when we first met with Avery Dennison, learned that they were going to jointly implement IT service management and HR service delivery and the procurement services all at the same time, it felt like that was pretty unique and pretty aggressive. Obviously, it was a huge success and we stitched it all together, but it was absolutely a concern from the beginning and something that continues to be unique across our portfolio. Not many customers attempt to do that all at the same time. It is a very aggressive plan, but if you can pull it off, it accelerates transformation in a very meaningful way. So kudos and hats off to the Avery Dennison team that rallied and executed in a good way. I'd say the other thing that's unique, most organizations of the size and scale of Avery Dennison have an HR operating model in place, and they're looking to create efficiencies and optimize HR service delivery by implementing ServiceNow HR service delivery. So very similar to implementing multiple products. Chassidy's charter was to stand up a global HR services delivery team in conjunction with defining a solution to support that team that doesn't yet exist. I think that's pretty unique in terms of like implementation, because like I said, most of the time customers have an operating model and we're designing solutions to fit that operating model. And I think the last big one for me was because Avery's a global organization and relatively complex, having a multi-vendor support model to support the transformation was pretty unique. You have ServiceNow as the software provider that played a key role in solutioning and looking at product features that we needed to enable. Account management support, we had Leapgen as the HR strategy and advisory component, helping lead and direct the shape of the transformation. We, DeAnti, were the technical partners on the HR service delivery product. And Avery Dennison uses a third-party outsourced managed services provider to manage the platform. So just aligning 4 or 5 different organizations around a common goal and a common theme was pretty unique.
Thanks, Greg. Super helpful. Chassidy, let's turn it back to you just to talk about some of the other highlights. What are the things of which you're most proud that you accomplished with the E3 program?
Yeah, I think there's a few. One is just the overall engagement and alignment we had from an HR leadership perspective, which allowed us to pull really our top talent from field HR into this new group, this new team that we've built, and just some of the engagement we've had from that team. They've been incredible. They continue to be incredible. And they're now bearing kind of the digital torch from an HR standpoint, right? They're the high technology users. They're very capable in understanding process design and workflow. They have an eye on employee experience all the time. And so we've kind of created this leadership in that space internally, which is pretty cool. The other piece, which we didn't talk about yet, but we've haven't just done HR service delivery. We also have implemented onboarding. We did that a year ahead of our plan because of COVID. We had a need to do better around having tools and standards, et cetera, processes to better virtually onboard talent during the pandemic. And so we did onboarding a full year earlier than expected. And we're live in all countries for onboarding for professionals now, and in shop floor in some countries as well. So I think that's a big one. And probably shared portal. So Greg hit on that around, it's not necessarily normal that we did this all at once. And it was hard work. It required a lot of alignment between our functions in HR and IT, and it was not always easy. But it was very much the right decision because, as Greg pointed out, it is an accelerator of transformation. It's an accelerator of adoption. And I wouldn't want to now have to do it right after, like if you're on your own portal, it would be harder. And I know a lot of people are in that situation, and I can imagine that it's pretty hard. So even though it was difficult, I'm really glad we did that. Our portal, which we call ADA, so AD.A, is always growing, developing, and changing. It's not super fancy, but it's effective. And the feedback from an HR service delivery standpoint and the HR services on the portal continues to be really strong from our employees. So I would say those are those are the things I'm most proud of.
That's great. And I think we actually have a screenshot here. I think you included that for us. Samara, if you don't mind moving ahead, I think the next slide might be a screenshot of Ada. So maybe let's pause here for a second and talk a little bit more. As you just said, Chassidy, you're continuing to evolve your solution, which I think is fantastic as well. You haven't treated this as we went live and we're just done. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're measuring your success moving forward and how you continue to grow and evolve your service delivery and things like the Ada portal?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we kind of branded Ada, we also built, and this was a big part of our change management and adoption pieces, we built a group of Ada ambassadors, and they were not just HR people, it was cross-functional. It was mostly around deployment, but we still tap into that group today to get feedback from what they're experiencing with the portal, and what others are experiencing, whether there are challenges or things they like, dislike, etc. And so we have an employee experience team specific to ServiceNow that meets every month and runs through kind of the priority enhancements that are what we call shared enhancements. So they impact the user experience on the portal. They're not necessarily specific to an HR service or an IT service or procurement service, but it's really about that overall experience from a portal perspective. And so we're looking at that. From an HR service delivery perspective, we're really mostly trying to create the measure around experience, which has been kind of a challenge. It's a little bit of we're inventing it as we go. We don't do SLAs in HR, which I know may raise some eyebrows, because I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations, I think, enjoy the SLA functionality in ServiceNow, and it obviously exists. But the reason we chose not to do them was we did not want to drive the wrong behaviors around trying to close a case. We really wanted to make sure that people's needs were getting met. And so we try to measure that in other ways. In onboarding in particular, we do a lot of check-in pulsing on how things are going from the hiring manager and new hire perspective. And we've built dashboards on those surveys. So we can see how things are going. And then in the moment, if we get a negative survey response, we actually get a notification into the GWO, the service center, and they can immediately follow up with the hiring manager, the new hire, and say, hey, what's going on? How can I help? And those things that we get pinged on are what are driving our, improvement and enhancement list as well.
That's great. A question, because you mentioned it a couple of times. You mentioned your professionals, and then you mentioned folks on the shop floor. What differences have you seen in terms of their expectations? And even, did you build anything different in terms of service delivery model? Are you seeing differences in terms of adoption? And maybe, Alex, I'll pull you into the conversation as well. As you were building out the vision for Avery Dennison and partnering with Chassidy and team, what did that really look like as you approached the different personas within the organization?
Alex, do you want to take that one first and I can jump in?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm happy to. I'm just also looking at some of the questions in the chat. And Tanya, you asked something similar on prioritizing the employee experience, and the workforce is changing expectations. What were some of those different expectations? And I'll let Chassidy speak to how the specific platform was designed in that case. But we knew, so part of the initial business case and part of the first time that we really presented this recommendation to the HR leadership team, part of the feedback and the approach that we took was to say, historically, Avery Dennison has been very North America centric and has been very professional population centric. There's about 5,000 employees in North America. And because headquarters is there, it does tend to be easier to say, let's go with this population first and look at our English speaking professional population. We actually took the opposite approach and said that we were going to start with shop floor, specifically within China and Hong Kong. And that was part of how we initially, I believe, got leadership buy-in to the idea, was to say, we're going to pivot and focus on our largest workforce that's underserved today. And so because of that, we had to learn more about that workforce. It wasn't a workforce that had a significant focus from a digital solutions or an HR services perspective. And so we took a very different approach around voice of the employee, as well as really getting to know those leaders. And as Chassidy mentioned, focusing on building a team of people who were on the ground in HR in different areas of the world, all a part of the global team. So to do that in building that vision, we actually hosted a series of sessions around the country, or I'm sorry, around the globe. We spent a week together in Hong Kong, leading a true in detailed design session around the vision for experience and around the vision for services and how we would support. We spent another week in Amsterdam and did that again across North America and South America as well. In doing that, we focused on unique services and a different experience for the professional population as well as for the shop floor population. And so I think that was really key, was to understand those unique workforce expectations. I won't deep dive into what each persona group wanted, but we led that work, as Chassidy said, for a good 6 months in advance of even requesting funding for the technology. Yeah. Chassidy, what would you add?
No, I think David also specifically asked around like differences in adoption and utilization, and just how people are using it. And I would say that there's definite uses, and there's a question in the chat as well around what were the expectations of the workforce. Our professional workforce expected to have technology at work that works like they have at home, to be able to search for something, find it on their own, to not necessarily have to go find a human being in a chair every time they had a question, and to not have to go to 5 people to get a question answered. Those would be kind of the things that I would say were like the high level, just to have a little bit more sophistication than what we had in ease of use. And so we definitely built the ADA portal to meet those needs. And we had particulars in the design where if you click on, you have an HR request, we did a lot of personalization as well. So we thought through what that shop floor employee, right, that professional employee might need, or what they should see that makes it not very overwhelming, very simple, and easy to find, that what they need and make their request. For shop floor in particular, if ServiceNow was a greenfield implementation, for them it was a greenfield because they didn't have any digital identity before this project. So we had a whole bit of change management just working through like Okta and getting to ServiceNow in a secure access type of way. That technology had to be built in terms of access for them. And then we've been rolling that out. So we've had bumps with length of password. We've had all sorts of challenges, to get the single sign-on up and running for them. And it's a much longer journey. And I would say our adoption varies greatly by region. US is definitely in the lead, and even more so now because our shop floor employees go through ADA onboarding. So before they even start, they have seen ADA, they're completing their payroll and other paperwork or virtual paperwork on ADA. And so now they're one step further ahead of knowing that it's going to add value to them in their overall experience because they've seen it before they even get in the door. In other countries, we've seen all great initiatives around adoption, and in some places we still have a lot of work to do. So we're definitely still on that journey.
Makes sense. So we have some good questions in the chat that I want to make sure that we get to, Chassidy. So I will ask any last thoughts before we get to the questions, last minute advice, and then what's next for Avery Dennison in your journey?
So I would just say 2 things in terms of kind of advice. One thing that I would say we, looking back, we're happy we did is going through doing HR service delivery first and then onboarding. With onboarding, if that's something you're looking to do, it's as heavy or heavier lift than service delivery because it's pretty complex with the workflows. That said, the benefits are phenomenal. Like we've gotten great feedback on using ServiceNow for onboarding. So that's something I know we didn't have a lot of time to talk about, but it has been a great learning for us in this 2.5-year journey. What we're doing next is taking a very deep breath, because we've done implementation for 2.5 years. And so we're taking a pause and reassessing, are we meeting those goals that we had when we started E3, and where do we need to fill in, right? So where do we need to go back and prioritize our enhancements, process improvements, check in with some new focus groups, some smaller projects, like we're gonna dabble in EDM, electronic document management, in ServiceNow this year. We're gonna add onboarding journeys in. So we definitely have more new coming, but just not on the scale of what we've done for the last couple of years. Yeah.
I think you probably earned a little bit of a breather.
Yeah, I think everybody needs a breather for sure.
Sounds great. Well, why don't we just dive into a couple of questions? First question here from Susie. How many people did you say were on the HR digital team?
Yeah, our HR solutions team is pretty small. So we had myself, Christina, who I see is in the chat answering questions, and a global project leader by the name of Simone, who were kind of the three full-time dedicated. We have regional HR solutions leads that played a big role. And then that team of 35 that I mentioned were individuals who are now inside of the GWO organization, and HR partners who had a strong interest in the overall delivery. That's what we call our core team. So the core team was not full-time. I would say there were probably 4 to 5 maybe total that were really mostly dedicated to the work, which is why we counted so much on Leapgen and the anti to help fill in what we did not have in scale.
And what impact have you seen in terms of the HR managers? Have they been able to refocus their effort from tactical work to more strategic work and have a more positive impact on business outcomes?
Yeah, so we, as I mentioned, built in 2019, went live in June of 2020, so in the midst of the pandemic, and field HR was dealing with a lot. They were working with EH&S constantly on keeping employees safe, right? Because our manufacturing operations kept going. They did not shut down because we were essential businesses. And so they were dealing with, a lot around employee safety, a lot around adjusting to remote work. And again, it was a little bit of, had we not made that change and focus and being able to kind of get role discipline and divide and conquer some of this work, I think it would have been almost untenable for our field HR organization to have done what COVID brought. We started to play the best roles for each other in the way that we were set up. And having this access for people when they were remote was a game changer, because 6 months prior to this, we didn't have it. And so this concept of, I think I need to talk to my person went away pretty quickly when you could and wanted to just be able to be online and do that. So it actually helped accelerate our change. And we did see, I think, HR BPs freed up, a little bit at the beginning and a lot more now. And again, still work to do. It's a continuing journey.
Yep. I'm going to try and get through some of these. I might miss some, so team, call it out if I miss any. Have you been able to cut down on misrouted requests by having a consolidated HR and IT portal?
I don't know that we have like a baseline to say how many misrouted requests we have. We don't get a ton of requests going to IT that are meant for HR, just by the way that we've designed the portal. And this is also probably a big piece, we have not yet turned on chat for HR. So by the way that we've designed the portal, it's pretty clear where the HR support and the IT support. Now, when we start to dive into chat, perhaps there could be a little bit more, messiness there, but we really haven't had a huge issue. We, of course, get a few things that need to be passed over, but not a ton.
I know you said this is an evolving solution depending on where your shop floor employees are around the world, but how are shop floor employees accessing Ada or the ServiceNow solution? Is it through their own devices? Do you have things like kiosks? What does that look like in terms of access?
Yeah, they can do both. So the way that we're set up, if they can download the ServiceNow app and access Ada through the app, whether it be at work or on their own personal mobile device. We do have kiosks set up, and we based kiosks off of kind of, size of site, size of employee base. So some sites have multiple kiosks in place. And the kiosks range from anything from our very creative EMEA and Latin America teams that are like these cool, like space pod looking things that are amazing, to very simple laptops right in the break room. So we have the gamut. And so they access both ways. We do have an ongoing challenge in China because the Now app is not yet available in the Android store just due to China regulation. So we're looking at creating a custom app there that brings people to Ada. Yeah.
Makes sense. So we kind of skipped over, I got excited about everything you were talking about on your initial slide. There was so much to dig into there, but you mentioned knowledge management, which is something we could probably spend 4 hours talking about. Can you talk a little bit about what do you include in terms of knowledge management, the types of inquiries? Are you including 100% of what we would term HR on Ada? Are you including recruiting, data management, benefits, learning, comp, employee data, business requirements, employee relations, et cetera? Can you just kind of run through that quickly?
Yeah, great question. I wouldn't say it's 100%. So as an example, employee relations is a no. We're not there yet. Not using Ada for that. But the way that we've structured is the GWO organization services all benefits, pay, time, attendance, general inquiries. So the where do I go, who do I talk to, what do I do type of questions. And we have some services that are more specific that are really dedicated to, question about my pay because something was wrong on a paycheck, or a benefit specific question. And then we have other services that one in particular is just called general inquiry. And that's either, hey, I don't know what category this fits into, or it doesn't fit into anything here. And so I just have this question. Can you help me, either answer it or get me to the right person? We do take on a good amount of volume through that. In terms of COE support, so talent acquisition or recruitment, total rewards, et cetera, we do get some of those inquiries through general, and we service those with, where we have the knowledge, but all of the HR team uses ServiceNow. So if we have to escalate or say, hey, we don't have a knowledge article and we don't really know the answer to this, we can assign that case to the group that does. And all of our HR team uses the knowledge base. So even though we might not have a dedicated service, or the GWO team doesn't technically manage that type of inquiry, our talent acquisition team, as an example, has put a lot of great information for people on Ada for their reference. So if they search, they can find what they need, and then they know where to go from there based on where the knowledge article directs them.
Wonderful. And last question, and then I'm going to turn it back to, I believe it's Greg, for the promising giveaway that I talked about at the beginning in the chat. A good question here from Tiffany. For your production employees, if they do submit a case or an inquiry, how do you circle back with them to close the loop if they don't have immediate access? Is somebody on the shop floor getting back to them? How do you make sure that their inquiry is responded to?
Yeah. Yep. So for shop floor communication, we do encourage the app because there's notifications. So they would get a notification if there's a comment on their case. And so we do encourage that, but we know not everybody is comfortable putting it on their personal phone. So we have also started a process where we will, if it's something that needs to be, it's either urgent or needs a dialogue, right? We don't want to go back and forth 100 times on the case. So we just want to set up a minute to get some more information from that person. We'll ask them when we can contact them and the best number to reach them as part of the case management, to just make that more efficient, specifically for that group who is deskless and is not online, all day, every day. So that's how we've been managing it for those cases that need more immediate response.
Perfect. So Chassidy, one last question for you that's really important. I bet there are a lot of people on the call here who probably want some time with you, don't want your inbox flooded with inquiries. How can people reach out to you if they want to have some follow-up conversation with you?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best way is on LinkedIn, and I've had the opportunity to connect with folks prior, whether after one of the webinars or through the Conference Board Council. So I'm always happy to have a conversation, and also, you know, for those that are on their ServiceNow journey to learn from others. Every time that we have a call with another ServiceNow client or someone, you know, thinking about it even, or going down this journey, I'm always taking things back to the team of, I heard this really cool thing that this company is doing. So I definitely enjoy doing that, and would be excited to do so.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chassidy. And as well, Leapgen and the Anti are amazing resources. As you've heard today, we strongly encourage all of our prospects and customers to connect with each other and never to go on this journey alone. As you've heard Chassidy articulate today, it's not just about the technology. It's always about the partnership with great organizations like Leapgen and the Anti. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Smith to talk about the exciting giveaway.
Debbie, before I do that, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thanks and congratulations again to Chassidy. And I'm looking at the participant list over on the right-hand side, and there's many people from Avery Dennison, from Leapgen, from the Anti, my team, who are on the call. So huge kudos and thanks for joining today, and thanks for all the efforts over the last 2+ years of making this success story happen. So we did register every single participant who registered for this webinar into a raffle. The raffle giveaway was an Amazon gift card worth $500. So the person that won the raffle is Laura Yingling from Dish Network. So congratulations, Laura, and be on the lookout from an email notifying you of that Amazon gift card. So Sam, I think we got one other slide. So just like Debbie said, if you're interested in, you know, speaking with Chassidy, Chassidy said it's okay to reach out to her via LinkedIn. You know, a big part of the success story was the partnership that was bridged between Leapgen and the Anti to take HR strategy into technical implementation execution. We are offering a complimentary 2-hour service consultation in order for you to get your questions answered. So we're seeing many questions over on the right-hand side of the chat queue here that we may or may not have been able to answer, but if you want those questions answered, there's an email address at the bottom end of that paragraph that says matt@theanti.com. You can also scan that QR code to get access to that. We'd be happy to engage in a conversation and do a more formal consultation with you all. I think that's it for me, Debbie, and if you want to wrap us up.
Absolutely. Huge thank you. Especially to Chassidy and the Avery Dennison team. We so appreciate you sharing your story. As Chassidy said, really the greatest success comes from clients sharing their story and their successes. Avery Dennison has clearly invested a lot to ensure that they bring the best service delivery to their employees around the world. And we really appreciate you taking the time to share your success with everybody who joined us today. A special thank you also to Leapgen and the Anti, and we thank you all for taking time to join us today. With that, we hope you enjoyed the time today, and thanks so much.